Do you guys want to know a trick to keeping your wine fresher longer once it's open? Well, I love these tricks because basically what it gives me is more options throughout the week, so that when I want to open different wine than what my husband wants to open, I don't feel bad about opening that bottle because I know that I can make it last the entire week, and over the course of the week I'll finish it in due time. It also means that if I just want to have like maybe a half a glass of wine or 1 glass of night, say on a school night, I can do that too, and I don't have to worry about finishing the whole bottle. So does that sound good to you? Do you want to know how to do it? I'm going to show you. So the first thing you need to know about wine and keeping it fresher longer is you need to know the 3 things that really stop it from staying fresh. These are the things that'll deteriorate a wine. Those 3 things are air, heat, and light, right? Air, heat, and light. So the colder something is, or the less heat it has, those processes are going to go along slower. So the oxidation process, all the processes that take away from the freshness of a wine will be slowed down. So the fridge or a cool spot is always a good way to cool down the wine. And you can even do this with a red wine. If you put your red wine in the fridge, then all you have to do is remember to take it out in enough time to get it to the temperature that you want to actually drink that wine. So the other 2 things, the light, well, just don't keep it in the light. Don't keep it in the sunlight either, because that won't help with the heat thing. And then the third one, the air, is kind of the trickiest of all because, well, air, especially oxygen, is everywhere. And the oxygen will oxidize the wine, which kind of takes away from the freshness of the wine. Now, if you guys remember my videos about decanting, sometimes you want to oxidize the wine. Sometimes you want to introduce some oxygen to the wine because it really makes the wine a little bit smoother. It brings out some of the aromas of the wine. So if you want to know how to do that, watch my videos about decanting. But this is something different that we're talking about. In this video, we're talking about how to keep the air out so that your wine can stay fresher longer. Because if you think about it, really, it's all a curve. You could look at it in terms of a graph. And the ideal thing about wine that I want to help you do is be able to drink the wine at its peak, so that no matter what the price point of the wine is, you can always drink the wine when it's tasting its best. So all of these little tricks that I have are meant to help you find when is that perfect window, when is the best time when the wine is at its peak, and then once I figure out when that is, how can I extend that as long as possible so that I have the most number of options as to when I can drink that wine. Does that make sense? Maybe it's a little geeky or scientific in the way I explain it, but I think you'll get the picture. So when you open a bottle of wine and it gets a little bit of air, maybe you've decanted it or done some of my tricks that I described in the other videos, and then it's tasting perfectly. It's really smooth, it's smelling beautiful, and you're enjoying that wine. The only thing is, you decide not to finish the bottle. Now what? Now there's part of you that thinks, oh, maybe I should finish it because it's just not going to taste as good tomorrow or the next day or the next day. Well, that's where my tricks come in, is this way you can rest assured you don't have to drink any more wine than you want to be drinking then, so you can save yourself the next morning, but you'll know that the next night the wine's going to taste great too. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. The first way is something called a Vacu-vin. And I say this is the first way because this is something that I've been using for years and years and years. It's something that's been around for a long time. And basically what you do with this is you, you put the little rubber stopper that they give you and when you buy one of these, and these aren't expensive, I think they're less than $10, into the top of the wine. Then you take your little vacuum pump and you pump. You pump out, you pump out the air that will deteriorate the wine. So then I wouldn't say it's a perfect vacuum seal, but it's a little bit better in terms of less air inside of the bottle to deteriorate the wine. Then you could stick this in the fridge and keep it cool, and it's going to keep the wine tasting fresher longer. I have heard from some people that they don't like using these because they think that it also sucks out some of the aromas of the wine, or it kind of stifles the smell of the wine. I don't have any scientific evidence for that, but if you feel that way, know that there are alternatives too. So one alternative to doing that is really you can just stick the cork back in the bottle. The only problem is, depending on how much of the wine you've drunk, you might have this big space of air that's left in there. So the real question is, what do you do with that air? One solution that I have is, if you find that you generally drink about half of the bottle of wine at a time, is I keep some of my leftover half bottles. From time to time, I'll drink a half bottle of wine, just for many of the same reasons we talked about, where I don't want to drink a lot of wine, or maybe I want to drink a different wine than my husband does. So these half bottles are really useful. And then afterwards, keep those bottles. They're really useful because now I could take the leftover wine, I could pour it into this half bottle, stick the cork in, and then I have the right sized bottle where there's less air inside of it. Okay, that's just a little insider's trick, and it doesn't cost you anything to do. The third trick you can use to preserve your wine is to use what's called an inert gas. It's inert because it doesn't actually react with the wine. Some types of sprays or gases or whatever might get absorbed into the wine. Like, let's say I took carbon dioxide and I pumped carbon dioxide into my bottle of wine. It would actually dissolve into the wine. It would make it a little fizzy. So an inert gas means that it's not actually going to interact with the wine at all. But the cool thing about what it does is, in this bottle, there's a gas called Argan in it. And when I spray it into the bottle of wine, it does something really cool. It acts as a little blanket on top of the wine, and that blanket keeps the wine safe from the oxygen, so that the oxygen doesn't interact and oxidize and deteriorate the wine. I think this is a really cool thing. These are also pretty cheap to buy, and I love the fact that I feel like my wine is really nice and blanketed and protected. It's kind of a cool thing. Another trick, and this is if you're really hardcore, meaning if you're like a wine collector or something like that, and you want to be able to taste a bottle of wine, but maybe you're not actually going to drink the bottle of wine, the rest of that bottle of wine, for, like, let's say even up to a year afterwards, then you might want to invest in this really fancy equipment, which is called, it's called a Vacu-vin. And this is a really crazy gadget that you can stick onto a bottle of wine. Oh, you need a bottle of wine with the cork on it, so that's not a bottle of wine with a cork. So this is a really cool thing that you can stick onto a bottle of wine. And what it will do, there we go. So then, what you can do with this Vacu-vin is it actually has a medical grade needle in it. I think some of the ones that are used when they do like lumbar punctures or a spinal tap. And this teeny tiny little needle will bore into a cork, and it will make the tiniest little hole in it, and then it'll use some of those gases to pump out some of the wine so that you can pour a taste or a glass or however much of the wine you want. And as the wine gets displaced from the bottle, it's also pumping in some of those inert gases into the bottle of wine, so it blankets it, and the empty space from the wine that you took out is not deteriorating the wine. Now, this is a really cool gadget, because then when you take it off the bottle of wine and remove the needle from the wine, It actually, the cork seals itself back up because it was such a small hole, and those corks are kind of malleable. And what ends up happening is you can't even tell that the cork has been compromised, and no air will actually go back into the bottle. So I think this is a really, really cool gadget. It's overkill for most of us, frankly, because unless you have bottles where you plan on drinking a little bit and you want to keep the rest of it for a very long time, you don't really need it. But for me, it's great because I actually do have a wine collection, and sometimes I want to know, is a bottle of wine ready to drink, or should I save it for later? So I use this then, and I love it for that. And it is a little bit expensive, and you also have to buy the cartridges as well. So those are some of your options for keeping wine at its peak performance, at its best drinking point for as long as possible, so you can drink it as often and the way that you want to. I hope this is helpful to you, and of course, like, subscribe, and comment on my videos. Let me know what you would like to know more about.